Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. This is a topic that has become more and more near and dear to me ever since having my almost 2-year-old. You will see as we go through this, made a lot of my own mistakes throughout my own hormone journey and trying to conceive journey. So a lot of that is, mistakes that hopefully you guys won't have to make with me sharing mine. So we'll hop right into it. So you are in the right place if you want to get pregnant in the near or distant future, or you don't necessarily know where to start or how to best support a fertile body or hormone balance. You're in the right place if you want to learn and empower yourself as a woman and tap into how the female body innately works. Or maybe you're a mom or caretaker who wants to learn this information to help a daughter or loved one. So our promise to you tonight, by the end of this workshop, you will have a better understanding of how to best support your hormones, fertility, and your own pregnancy journey. And just to clarify, and I hope I made this somewhat clear, at least when we were kind of marketing this workshop. If you have no desire to get pregnant, this is still a great workshop for you if you are in your premenopausal years, right? All the same things that we're going to say to essentially prepare for that fertility and pregnancy journey will benefit someone who's just trying to have balanced hormones as well. So agenda, what we'll talk about tonight. So first, we're going to go through what a healthy menstrual cycle looks like and just try to come to an understanding of what's normal and what might not be normal. We'll go through common signs of hormone imbalances and what you can do to reduce symptoms, specifically common hormone imbalances we see with a high percentage of our clients too. We'll go through 4 common mistakes that we typically see women making that contribute to imbalanced hormones and sometimes trouble conceiving. We'll go through 4 nutrition foundations for healthy, happy, and balanced hormones. So things you can start implementing now just through your food choices. Number 5, we'll go through 5 solid indicators at the end, a little checklist that's going to kind of help you see that your body is ready to conceive at that point. We can check all of those off. So stay until the end and you will get this free document that we put together. So we typically share this only with our one-on-one clients. So this is a treat for anyone who's here and is not a one-on-one client, or maybe you are and you just haven't checked this out yet. I wanted to give the PMS toolkit away because I think it's important for anyone who, again, is on a journey of trying to balance their hormones or is wanting to conceive in the near future. If you have symptoms of PMS, that should be almost like the first place to start, right? The first thing that we want to address in that journey. So that's why I wanted to start with this, is kind of like our starting point. So why this workshop tonight is different. So for one, it is specific to females. We are also going to focus on the foundations of hormone health and what those look like. And again, this is super helpful for all women in their premenopausal years, whether you want to be pregnant in the future or not. So with the right framework, we can eliminate confusion around your menstrual cycle. We can understand how to fuel a fertile body, what foods that we can eat to help with balancing our hormones. And number 3, we want you to be empowered to take the reins on your own health. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Steph. I am a wife and a mama to a tiny human and a tiny dog. I think I said earlier, but I have an almost 2-year-old now. I can't believe she's almost 2 already. I am a nutritional therapy practitioner, and Megan and I have been working together since July this past year. I'm also a certified personal trainer, and I am certified in pre and postnatal. So I love working with any mamas in any stage of their journey. It's one of my favorite clientele to work with. I'm also a functional blood chemistry specialist, so we order specific labs for our clients. Particularly, we like to track, especially pre and postpartum, with specific labs as well. I grew up as a dancer, and then I found my love for weights and yoga as I got older, and I very much followed a standard American diet growing up and became more curious about living a healthy lifestyle in college when I started studying exercise physiology. So what we do, we help women discover how to feel their best through not only nutritional guidance, but also really coaching them through how to be aware of their cycle, what certain things mean. And we also go through with almost all clients digestive support, right? So it's very intricately connected. Typically when people deal with hormone balances, they're also likely dealing with some sort of digestive issue, and vice versa. If someone comes to us with a digestive issue, there's likely a chance that there could be something off with their hormones as well. And many of our clients come to us in need of either that hormone help or digestive help. So how we help. As practitioner coaches and educators, we want to help women feel empowered in their own health, right? We want to help you eliminate confusion around what foods are best for your body, how to exercise in a way that's going to support your hormones, how to sleep in a way that's going to support your hormones. We want you to be confident in your body and your food choices. And we want you to know exactly what works for you so you can have a healthy, sustainable approach to your own health. So my story, so why this topic eventually became more and more important to me. I was a former pro bikini competitor and bodybuilding athlete. So I transitioned into this kind of style of exercise when I was in college, and I followed years and years of strict dieting and hours in the gym. I eventually became cold all the time. I started gaining weight, which was the opposite of what I was hoping to do. I was dealing with acne, specifically all around my mouth and my chin, which is an indicator that something is going on with hormones. I had poor recovery from working out, and the cherry on top of all of this is I lost my period. Losing my period was probably the first light bulb sign for me that something more serious was actually going on, right? And I was worried because I knew I wanted to conceive in the future. So that really led me down wanting to learn more about what was going on with my hormones. So finally, I stopped fighting my body. I stopped restricting calories. I focused on fueling my energy with solid meals. I was done killing myself in the gym, and I started doing more lower impact activities like yoga and walking. And I started educating myself on menstrual health and how to eat to support my hormones. So started doing a lot of reading, started to try to chill out and reduce the amount of stress that I had been putting on my body through that calorie restriction and over-exercise. So what I wish I knew before all of this, I wish I knew that the way in which we eat affects our menstrual cycle, our hormones, and ultimately our metabolism. I also wish I knew that your menstrual cycle is a report card of your overall health, right? So if you are getting a period every month on a pretty consistent basis, and you aren't experiencing much PMS at all, and it's almost like your period surprises you, it comes up on you and you didn't even know it was coming. That is one sign of a healthy menstrual cycle, and I wish I had realized that before. Number 3, so the way that you feel changes throughout your menstrual cycle, and this is normal too, right? It's normal to have some waxing and waning of energy levels. Same thing with your appetite. What's not so normal is when those are extreme differences to the energy, to the cravings, etc. And I also wish I knew that it's important to look at more than just the food that you're eating and the amount of food that you're eating, but it's also important to look at your sleep, your stress, and your digestion. So lowering stress is the best way to support a fertile body. And if you guys would share in the chat what your stress looks like, right? So give me a stressor in your life, right? Whether it's a hard job, an injury, give me an example of a stressor that you deal with. Okay, Natasha, always so many things to do because I wear a lot of caps. Yep. Managing type 1 diabetes, Graves and celiac, and now endometriosis. Yes. Stress at work. Yep. Unexpected deadlines, pressure from colleagues. Definitely. Yes. Balancing work and family. Not sleeping great. Totally. Oh, Megan, less than 6 hours. It would be hard to function on less than 6 hours. Definitely. Okay, so all great examples. Yeah, blame the dog. All great examples. I think what I like about everyone sharing different examples too is that we notice that all of those stressors are very different from one another, right? And sometimes we don't necessarily think of certain things in our life being a stressor. So I kind of broken it down into these categories. There's probably many more that I don't have listed here, but I feel like I have tried to combine as much as I could here. So let's start with physical, right? This one's kind of an obvious one, but we know that there can be physical stress on our body, right? So for example, exercise is a physical stressor. An injury is a physical stressor. Maybe you have a physically demanding job. You know, maybe you're a nurse and you're on your feet for 12 hours a day, right? Maybe you're someone who easily gets over 10,000 steps a day just from their job. So physical, that's one example. Lifestyle is another example, right? So Natasha, you just said you wear a lot of different caps. You're always busy, right? That's sort of like a lifestyle example where, you know, you might become run down if you're running around constantly. Another lifestyle example could be, again, like continuous lack of sleep, that we're put into a sleep debt because we like to stay up late or go out late with friends during the week, certain things like that. So lifestyle stressors, just the way that you go about living your typical week. Mental and emotional stress. So mental and emotional stress could be anything from, you know, maybe you're caring for a sick relative, right? Maybe you have a toxic work environment and, you know, you're not treated well by some of your colleagues. These are different examples of mental and emotional stressors. Last one is environmental. So environmental could be, you know, let's say you work in a really old building that might happen to have mold, or, you know, you live in an area where the air quality isn't great. These are examples of environmental stressors, right? So we just went through a ton of different stressors. We want to make sure when we are going to balance your hormones that none of these buckets are overflowing, right? And if they are overflowing, what can we do to support the buckets so they aren't? Okay, so these are just different examples. And I think it's helpful to go through all of these because, again, I think some people might not identify some of these things as stressors, but we want to reduce every single bucket as much as we can. So what does lowering stress look like? So this is my example from kind of that stressful period of my life and what my health looked like. So for me, lowering stress on my body looked like starting to nourish my body, right? Starting to eat for health and for hormone balance versus like severe restriction, or even not being mindful that you're not eating enough necessarily, right? So nourishment versus restriction, starting to eat more and starting to eat more nutrient dense foods was what that looked like for me. Cycle syncing my exercise versus high intensity interval training all month. So this was a big one. I think a lot of people, you know, they find a certain mode of exercise that they really enjoy, and they just want to do that all the time, right? Like I think of my sister-in-law who loves Orange Theory, right? And when you cling on to a specific let's say workout class or something like that, and you do it all month long, and you're not really cycling in recovery or maybe lower impact exercises such as just going for a walk or yoga, it can end up being a physical stressor on the body. So for me, I had to chill out on, working out hard 5 or 6 days a week all month long, right? We'll get to this later on in the workshop, but I like to think of our period or our menstrual cycle in 4 seasons, right? The winter season, spring, summer, fall. And I kind of have now started to sync my exercise with those seasons. So in the winter, that's typically the season that you relate to your period. So if you think of the winter season, if you live in a cold climate anyway, and it is cold, you think, you kind of want to be inside during that time, wrapped under a blanket. It's more of a restful time period. And then we think of right after the winter and we're in the spring, right? Things start to liven back up again. Our energy starts to rise again, right? This would be our follicular phase, and we can start to ramp that intensity in our exercise back up. And then we have the summer, which is ovulation. Our energy is at its peak. It's appropriate to continue hard workouts at that time. And then after the summer, we have the fall season, which would be the luteal phase. And during this phase, again, we start to kind of calm down a little bit with the intensity in our exercise as we start to get closer to our period. So this was a big change for me. Next one was starting to sleep 7+ hours a night versus being deprived, right? So another stressor I hadn't mentioned that was kind of going on at this point in my life. I had moved to LA. I was new to a brand new city. I had a new job and I was working really hard. And I kind of, I was a personal trainer at the time, and I wasn't really prioritizing appropriate boundaries within my schedule. It was kind of like, oh, okay, if a client wants to train at 8 p.m., like I'll be there. If they want to train at 5 a.m., I'll be there. So I was kind of depriving my sleep and just without setting boundaries, which brings me to the last one, setting boundaries. And this again went for work. It went for social settings, right? Being able to start saying no to things that, weren't necessarily, didn't necessarily excite me, so to speak, starting to just honor what my body really needed. So let's dive in. We're going to start with talking about why a healthy menstrual cycle is so important. So again, I'm curious if you guys can put in the chat why you might think a healthy menstrual cycle is so important. What do you guys think? Anyone? It's connected to everything else. Yep. Indicator of overall health. Yes, for sure. Yep, it's that report card. Awesome. So to start, I just went through, we have 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, right? And keep in mind these numbers that I have next to each phase are obviously give or take a few days for everyone, right? No one is exactly the same whatsoever. So starting with the menstrual cycle, our period lasts anywhere, it's from days 1 to 7 of our menstrual cycle, rather, again, give or take a few days. Our follicular phase right after our bleed are days 1 to 12 of our cycle. And you'll see I put 1 to 12 and 1 to 7 for menstrual. So technically our follicular phase includes our period bleed at the beginning. For the sake of keeping it a little easier, I broke them down into the 4 because I feel like that's how most people reference the menstrual cycle. So period, follicular phase usually lasts till day 12. Then we have our ovulatory phase. So these are the days of the month where you could actually get pregnant, where your body drops an egg. And those days are typically 12 to 15 of your cycle. And then after that, we slide into our luteal phase, which is typically around days 15 to 30 of our cycle. So the menstrual phase. During menses, our energy is naturally at its lowest point. So at this point, the body is working overtime to shed the uterine lining, right? So kind of how we just talked about the menstrual cycle being like that winter season. I hope that's like a helpful analogy in kind of thinking about things kind of like dying down, energy starting to be lower, and that's normal, right? It's normal that our energy is a little lower because of what our hormones are doing. What's not so normal is for it to be so low that it's impacting our life in a way that we can't do our typical activities. So follicular phase, technically, again, starts day 1 of our bleed and lasts until ovulation. Towards the end of our period, that energy picks back up and stays, and then hormones FSH and estrogen begin to rise. During our ovulatory phase, hormones LH and estrogen spike, along with energy levels, and an egg is released. And again, this is where we can get pregnant. And then we have the luteal phase. So after ovulation, up until your period, estrogen and progesterone rise, and then energy starts to drop. So how do you know if you have a healthy menstrual cycle? We already kind of chatted about it being anywhere from around 1 to 30 days, but what else do we feel like are good indicators of a healthy menstrual cycle? And feel free to drop it in the chat if you have any thoughts on this. Not having pain. Yeah, definitely, Brittany. No PMS for sure. Yeah, like that period sneaks up on you because you don't have any of those painful symptoms. Normal mucus. Yep. Awesome. So here's a couple of bullets of what a healthy menstrual cycle should look like, right? So we have that full cycle length of 28 to 35 days. We ovulate every month. Our bleed lasts anywhere from 3 to 7 days. And your period does not interrupt or keep you from typical activities, right? You're not having to call into work because your cramps are so bad, or you're not having to cancel lunch with a friend because you're at home with a migraine and can't get out of bed. Examples like that. Other signs of a healthy cycle, right? So we have a healthy libido every month. Our sex drive is good. We're able to easily maintain our weight, right? And that's anywhere between, I would say, a 2 to 3 pound variance throughout the month too, right? It is typical to see some weight fluctuation, but otherwise it's pretty easy to maintain your weight with your current routine, and you're not having to go to any extremes with your diet, your exercise, or anything like that to maintain a certain weight. You have daily bowel movements. So this one is super important. And like I said at the beginning, our digestion and our hormones are so intricately connected, right? If we're not having daily bowel movements, there's a really good sign that we are not excreting the amount of hormones that we need to be, right? A lot of the times when we see clients with very bad cramps and a lot of pain and stuff like that, a lot of them actually deal with constipation because they aren't eliminating the hormones through their stool on a daily basis, and it gets backed up. Another sign of a healthy cycle, steady energy and a steady appetite. So you're able, again, to have pretty solid energy throughout the month with the typical dips that we would expect, in a typical appetite without having extreme cravings around your cycle. So abnormal menstrual cycle. So symptoms of an abnormal menstrual cycle look like a cycle that's shorter than 27 days. You might deal with heavy bleeding and clotting, typical PMS symptoms, and it interferes with your ability to live life normally. Other signs of an unhealthy cycle. You sometimes skip periods. You see some spotting before periods. You have loose stools quite frequently during your period. And sometimes I've even heard of vomiting during your cycle as well. So those are some kind of red flags of something going on specifically with your hormones and your cycle. So I like this kind of little checklist to go through, right? And it's worth just looking through. And if you suffer from more than one of these, even more than one of these a month, I would say there's an area for opportunity with hormone balance, right? So if we are dealing with acne, again, around the mouth is a big hormonal one. You deal with a lot of bloating, you deal with bad cramping, heavy flow, large clots, headaches and migraines on a monthly basis, nausea, fatigue, anxiety, depression, tender breast, especially around your cycle, right? So if you're dealing again with more than one of these, it could be a good indicator that something deeper is going on. So common hormone imbalances that we see. One being low progesterone, right? So if you're having really short cycles, again, anywhere less than 27 days, that could be a sign of low progesterone. Another one is you're having sleep disturbances. So you have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep through the night. Next could be spotting before your period even starts, and anxiety. So those are some common bullets for low progesterone. And typically when we see low progesterone, we also see excess estrogen. So excess estrogen could be a heavy flow, painful periods, sometimes longer cycles than those, the 35 days that I had mentioned earlier, and tender breasts. There's more. These are big symptoms of this though. And it's common to have both low progesterone and excess estrogen. They kind of go hand in hand. So another hormone imbalance that we see is PCOS. And common myth is that you cannot get pregnant with PCOS, right? You certainly can, and you can certainly manage PCOS through nutrition and lifestyle changes. So some symptoms are kind of red flags of PCOS, or symptoms also of high testosterone and androgens. You typically have high testosterone and androgens if you have PCOS. Facial hair, chin hair, neck hair, cysts, thinning of your head hair, and cystic acne. So 4 big mistakes that lead to hormone imbalances and what we recommend doing instead. So one, I've already talked about this one in length with myself, right? A big mistake that I used to make is over-exercising. And I think over-exercising could potentially look different from person to person, right? What one can handle in terms of this is different. But overtraining, poor recovery, and lacking balance with regenerative activities, right? So poor recovery, it might look like, you have a hard time sleeping after workouts. It takes you maybe 2, 3, 4 days to recover from a workout. You still have that like lingering soreness a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days later sometimes. And again, lacking balance with regenerative activities, right? I think it's so important if you're going to do, let's say a hard strength training workout, that you're also pairing that with at least 5 to 10 to 15 minutes of recovery afterwards, whether that's foam rolling, stretching, making sure you're also having that regen time as well, right? You're not just running into the gym, hitting a hard workout and running out. So what to do instead? We talked about this earlier when we went through the different seasons for the menstrual cycle. So cycle sync your movement, right? During that winter season, instead of trying to push through and get to a hard workout, this is actually the time to listen to your body and take it easy, right? So if you feel like you actually want to rest and not go to a workout, don't push it, rest, don't do anything, or do something really low impact, right? Do a yoga class from home or go out for a walk outside. So those are some good examples there. And then when you are in that follicular phase or right after your period, especially, and then that ovulatory phase, those spring and summer seasons. Those are the times to want to hit it hard. And again, for every exercise session, prioritize a recovery aspect. Okay, so another common thing we see is long-term use of hormonal birth control, right? And so why this could potentially impact your overall hormonal balance. For one, if you go onto birth control for any reason that is not for safe sex, essentially, and you're going on because your doctor, said it would heal your acne, or it would help with your painful periods. This is a Band-Aid approach to why you were having those symptoms in the first place, right? So then when you do go on birth control, let's say for a year, a couple years, maybe even more than that, what happens is we continue to suppress those hormones. And mineral imbalances come from being on birth control for a long time as well, because birth control also depletes us of our minerals. And then a lot of the times when we see clients coming off birth control, we see gut issues, right? So a certain period of time has to be spent after coming off the pill on now healing the gut. So what to do instead? Practice fertility awareness method. Or if you are on birth control and you want to come off, prep your body before coming off birth control, right? We go through a whole protocol with one-on-one clients if we know someone is wanting to come off birth control in the near future, really upping the mineral content of food, really working on their gut and their digestion. And give yourself time, if you are on birth control prior to trying to conceive, to come off and try to heal any imbalances that may be there from being on the pill. So that's really important, is that we don't come off the pill and then a month later we're trying to conceive already, right? We want to, I would say, give ourselves at least 6 months to a year if that's realistic for you. Yes, and if you guys have questions, please ask. Sorry, I should have said that way at the beginning. Another common mistake that we see, too many processed foods. So a lot of processed foods, packaged foods. We see a lot of that. Convenient foods, right? That's kind of the US way of living, the standard American diet. We see a lot of processed foods because it's easy. And the issue with that is just that we're lacking essential minerals in our diet when we're relying too heavily on those foods. We also see a lot of inflammatory oils in gums. So things like canola oil, and a lot of gums in, plant-based milks and plant-based foods and things like that. And then also, sugary coffees and alcohol, right? Starbucks is, I know, a lot of people's favorites, and having those lattes. And then obviously when we drink alcohol in excess, that can have a negative effect on our hormones as well. So what to do instead? Whole food approach when we can, right? Versus relying on, again, packaged foods. Hydrating with minerals, so adding things like electrolytes or mineral drops back to our water, so we are getting more minerals back in our diet. Making sure we're having adequate protein throughout the day and at every single meal, and reducing overall alcohol intake prior to trying to conceive. So number 4, another thing that affects our overall hormones is living a go, go, go lifestyle. So being in a sleep debt, right? So we consistently get less than 7 hours of sleep. That's going to certainly catch up to us and definitely affect our overall hormone balance. Next one is multitasking, right? If you're someone who, eats breakfast in the car on the way to work, or, you're on the phone while, while playing with your kid, or, constantly being a multitasker, you have so many things on your list that you're always trying to get done. Lack of sunlight, so not getting outside enough during the day, you know, living inside, working inside. We don't prioritize any time for fun because we're just too busy, we tell ourselves. And last one is blue light overload, right? So we obviously live on our phones, we work from our computers, and then we go home at night and we watch Netflix. So we're just in an excess of that blue light. So what to do instead? Prioritize sleep, shooting for at least 7 hours a night minimum. We like to say 7 to 9, and that's going to vary by the individual as well, how much sleep that you'll need. But that's a big one. That's a big one. Slow down and make more time for fun. Get at least 10 minutes outside every day, right? If you can get out first thing in the morning and let the sun get on your face, that's so good for our sleep, so good for our circadian rhythms. It's good for our mental state just to be outside. And then lastly, cutting down on blue light, especially within those 2 hours before bed, right? So a lot of the times with our clients, we like to tell them, you know, if you are going to have blue light within 2 hours before bed, at least try to wear blue blocker glasses. And that's a good way to kind of help mitigate that blue light, especially close to bedtime. So ways to gain insight into our hormones and our ovulation patterns, right? There's 3 different methods we're going to kind of go through, and these are great indicators, again, of a healthy hormone pattern. And it's helpful to know if we're ovulating, again, even if you want to get pregnant or not, right? If we're ovulating, it is a good sign of so many other health indicators. You know, it's a good indicator that, you know, we have good bone health, and the list can go on with ovulation. So number 1, we're going to start with basal body temperature. So basal body temperature is essentially using a thermometer. You have to get one that measures to the 100th degree, which you can easily find on Amazon, fairly inexpensive. And what you do is you put the thermometer under your tongue in the morning before you get out of bed, and you look for a temperature read. So during your follicular phase, your temperature should read between 97.01 to 97.77. And then as we enter our luteal phase, they should read higher than 97.8, right? And if you are reading your temperatures on a monthly basis and you're consistently in the 96s or the low 97s, that's an indicator of, again, something deeper going on with our hormones, because we're not in that sufficient range. So I liked this little example. This is actually data from my Oura Ring that I find fascinating. So the Oura Ring tracks your temperature for you. And I wanted to specify, so ovulation occurs after a dip in your temperatures, and then your temperature will start to rise again. So that's kind of a cool little, I don't want to say it's a confirmation of ovulation, but it's a good sign that ovulation occurred, right? So you can see where this little circle is here. My temperatures dropped and then they rose back up around, it says cycle day 20. So on January 8th, they came back up. So it's a good sign that ovulation occurred during that time. And I liked to compare it to the Flow app. I also use that app. And I wanted to put a disclaimer out there. I've been using the Flow app for probably 4 years at this point. I started using it before I had my daughter, used it, and have been using it since after my daughter. So it's been almost 4 years. So it was pretty amazing to me. You can see this little circle around the 20 was my ovulation date. And it syncs up almost, or I'm sorry, January 9th over here, January 9th. And it syncs up almost exactly with January 8th in my Oura Ring. But using just an app alone is not a concise enough indicator of ovulation, right? At best, these apps are taking guesses. So I was actually quite impressed when I saw this data that it was as close as the Oura Ring had predicted. But I think that's, it's kind of nice to see the trends between the two. So again, your body temperature drops just before your ovary releases an egg. So another indicator, another method of tracking overall hormone balance is through cervical mucus, right? So it's going to vary throughout the month. So that's one thing. You should see a variance in your cervical mucus throughout the month. We have a dry phase where we're not fertile 1 to 3 days after our period. We have a sticky phase where it's white, cloudy, not fertile 4 to 6 days after our period. We have a creamy phase, creamy, thick, semi-fertile 7 to 9 days after our period, and then a clear phase, that stretchy egg white, fertile 10 to 14 days after our period. So this is an easy one to check. Obviously, when you go to the bathroom, just with toilet paper, if you want, you can use your hand if you want. But I think when you're doing this again with one of the others, it's nice to look for trends. So, and this is an easy enough one. You don't have to spend any money to do it. And then the last one I have here is OPK strips. So again, these are easy enough that you can just buy off of Amazon. They look very similar to little pregnancy tests. I think the box I have actually came with both OPK strips and pregnancy strips. So these are used to help identify your fertile window. Not a confirmation of ovulation again, but rather confirmation of an LH surge before ovulation. So it's more accurate than just relying on the app alone. And it's a simple, inexpensive way. So what you would do is you would keep these little strips in your bathroom. You would pee in a little cup every morning and stick one of these strips in there, right? So you can see the image on the right. The bottom strip has a light line, and then it gets a little darker as we get to the top. So you can see that very top one, when the line is almost, the line on the left is almost a little darker than the test line on the right. That is a confirmation, or rather, again, an LH surge before ovulation. So you would want to, if you were trying to conceive, you would want to have sex on the day that you have a darker line on that left strip. So just went through this, more reliable than a period app. All three of those methods are more concise predictors of hormone levels, right? Because that data is coming directly from your body versus just kind of anecdotal symptoms that we might put into the app. And again, where they're kind of generalizing and guessing. So you can use it in conjunction with an app, any of these sources. And again, all of these methods are useful for just women in general to gain body awareness, again, whether you want to be pregnant or not. So if you're suspecting your hormones are off, just based on any of the info tonight, we would love to work with you one-on-one. We will give bio-individual food recommendations, meaning specific to you in what your diet looks like. We'll do a deeper dive into your menstrual health. We have comprehensive lab work and even a Dutch hormone test if we need to go that far. So nutrition foundations for hormone balance, right? So these are things that we can start implementing now and that we have control over from the jump. So number one, making sure that we're prioritizing protein. This is the most underutilized and underfed macronutrient that I think every single client that I have worked with so far since I started working with Megan, that's almost always the first recommendation for people, is just to try to get in a little more protein. So why is protein so important for balanced hormones? For one, it's going to help keep our blood sugar balanced throughout the day. If our blood sugar is unhappy, it's going to have a direct effect on our hormones, and our hormones are going to be unhappy. So keeping blood sugar balanced, and that looks like, you know, having steady energy levels throughout the day. We're not having that 2-3 p.m. crash where we feel really tired and sluggish. We don't get hangry or shaky in between meals. We're steady. Another reason why protein is so important, it assists in liver detox. So we've mentioned quite a bit tonight about why it's so important to also look at digestion if we are dealing with a hormone imbalance. And this is another way having protein can help with the digestion, can help with gut health because it assists in the liver detox process. It assists directly in that digestion process. Number 2, so focusing on mineral-rich foods. So deficiencies in minerals can cause hormones to become imbalanced. Again, which we mentioned earlier, it's what we often see post-birth control. So really making sure we're having nourishing foods, rich in minerals, and oftentimes we will need additional supplementation when it comes to this because it's hard to get in the amount of minerals we need through food alone. Natasha, you said finally started back on macros counting for protein about a month ago. Yeah, I know. I think it is actually very helpful sometimes to like use those trackers just to get awareness around how much protein that you are getting, because we might think we're getting enough and then you log it in one of those apps one day and you're like, oh shoot, I'm only getting like 40 grams of protein a day. And it's actually much lower than we anticipate. Yeah. Are you able to order HTMA test? So Sammy, Megan and I are actually in the process of going through HTMA certification. So we should be able to do that in the near future. Yeah, your primary care provider has no idea what it is. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, sadly. I think it's probably more of a functional health tool that people use. But yeah, once we are able to order those, you will know because we will be so excited in sharing that with you guys. So eating every 3 to 4 hours and avoiding intermittent fasting, right? Intermittent fasting was one of those big buzzwords in the past. I think more people are having some awareness around this now, that it might not necessarily be the best tool for females in their premenopausal years to utilize. Most of the studies done on the benefits of intermittent fasting involve men or women of the postmenopausal years, which I think that diet is more appropriate for those people. For women in their premenopausal years, going too long between meals. So let's say you only eat breakfast and dinner, right? That's going way longer than 3 to 4 hours between meals. It's almost like a fast during the day. And avoid intermittent fasting. I'll say specifically, let's say longer than 12 hours, right? So no like 1 to 6 p.m. window during the day, right? No, that's too long. And the reason for that being, it affects our blood sugar once again, right? And our body will start to rely on stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline first thing when we're waking up. And our body will tap into those stress hormones more the longer we go without eating. And I think this is kind of a no-brainer. You guys would expect me to say this at this point after I've talked about all my restriction past, but avoid chronic dieting, especially if your goal is to balance your hormones or your goal is to get pregnant in the near future, right? So chronic dieting are the keywords, right? It's one thing if you're on an appropriate diet, you want to lose a little weight before conceiving, fine. That's something totally different. Chronic dieting is doing it for a very extended period of time and you're in a calorie deficit. And it is a major stressor on our hormones. And what's interesting with this one too is I think a lot of clients that come to us don't even realize that they're in a deficit. They don't realize that they're under eating. So it might not even be on purpose that you're doing this. But I think that's why it's useful to get an awareness of how many calories you're eating a day, right? Are you only eating 1,200 calories a day, 1,500 calories a day without noticing because you've just been doing it for so long and that's kind of been your norm, right? That's way too low. So we want to avoid being in a deficit for a long period of time. So additional support, in addition to those nutrition foundations, right? We recommend starting a prenatal at least 6 months to a year in advance of trying to conceive. Again, if you can. If you can start 1 to 3 months beforehand, that's still good. 6 months is better. A year is optimal. Lab work. So we, again, order custom prenatal lab panel for our one-on-one clients. just to make sure we're not starting off with any deficiencies in any minerals. We're not starting off in a low point with our thyroid hormones, because that is also directly impacted during pregnancy, right? We want to make sure that you're not iron deficient going into pregnancy, because a lot of women become iron deficient during pregnancy because our baby relies on us so much for that. So just some pointers there with the lab work. And then coming to our checklist, right? So how will you know when you're ready to try to conceive? So this is our little checklist. So I think these are good, solid indicators that your body's in a good place, your hormones are in a good place, and you're ready to try to start having a baby, right? So our BBT temps are within range, right? So you've been tracking for 6 months to a year, and your temperatures are consistently within those ranges that we had shared. Your cycle length is normal. You have a period every 28 to 35 days. And it's almost like clockwork at this point, right? And it is normal, by the way, to have some variance there too. It's okay if 1 month it's 29 days, the next month it's 32 days, the next month it's 28 days. A little bit of a variance there is okay. We just would like to see it stay within that range. You have adequate libido throughout the month. We're having normal bowel movements every day. And again, when we say normal bowel movements, we mean you're not having to strain when you go to the bathroom, or the opposite, they're not very loose. You're having normal, smooth, easy to go bowel movements every day. Anywhere from 1 to 3 is considered pretty normal. And then you have a period bleed that lasts 3 to 7 days as well. Okay, so summary, we want to evaluate our menstrual cycle, right? We want to avoid those 4 common mistakes we talked about in the beginning. We want to start gathering data on our hormone patterns, whether that's through OPK strips, BBT, checking cervical mucus, and then we want to start focusing on those nutrition foundations for hormone balance. So again, if you guys would like more one-on-one support, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help you along your hormone or fertility journey. And who is this for? So anybody who wants to try to conceive in the near future, we will help you throughout the entire preconception process, all the way to the postpartum and beyond. So the demands on our body change pretty drastically throughout the stages of from prenatal to postpartum, right? First trimester, second trimester, third trimester, our body needs different things. So let us help you thrive during this time of your life. And because you stayed until the end, Megan's going to share with you guys the free PMS toolkit. And I believe you can download it as a PDF to your phone. All right, and now we're at the end. Thank you guys so much for staying, or computer, yes, sorry. And if there's any questions, please drop them in the chat. Thank you, Rachel.
You guys can also just feel free to unmute yourself if you don't want to type your question in. You can just ask us.
Brittany, I'm curious how I can find a decent OBGYN that follows this same thinking. That's a good question. I think this is the first thing that's popping to my head right now, but I think finding maybe a local Facebook group where you can pop that question into the chat, or excuse me, as a comment, and asking people for recommendations there. And Sammy has a point. Yes, going with a midwife, you will definitely have someone that follows this same thinking. So, and you can also absolutely get support from a doula too. They typically have similar thinking to us as well.
I went on your the link to book a discovery call. It looks like you're booked out for a while. So I was just wondering what your availability is like.
I'll double check that because there should be times that are showing up over the next month. So I'm going to check that right now. And
Okay.
then you
Awesome.
can still use that same link. Just check it in like 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Brittany. All right, any other questions? What do you think about all those different NFP marks? Megan, do you have any input on this? Thank you, Sammy. I'm not sure. Rachel.
No, I'm not sure. I don't
Yeah.
know what it's talking about.
I would have to look into
Are we
that.
out of the loop?
Rachel always comes up with good questions.
You know.
Oh,
she does
Sammy's
a
trained
lot
in
of
the
her
great
research.
method.
Yeah, hi, it's Rachel here.
Hey, Rachel.
I my sister follows the Marquette method, and all of them are just different combinations of like looking at your cervical mucus or your body temperature and that kind of a thing. And I didn't know if it needs to follow the specific natural family planning school of thought, or if you follow the way you teach it, and that's fine, that's sufficient.
I actually really love that you just asked that, Rachel, because I think everyone's journey is so different, and you have to kind of follow, like if that method's working for your sister, that's fantastic, right? But I think just you can always take what works for you and leave what doesn't, sort of speak. As well, if you don't necessarily need to follow it to a T. That's kind of what I do, just from all the educational pieces that I've learned, right? I kind of take what works for me and leave what doesn't.
I feel like there's a lot of overlap with these methods too, and you
Yeah.
can kind of figure out like what are the overlapping principles or like what's common among them. So like the fertility awareness method is what I've always gone off of. And I think that as long as you're tracking cervical mucus, tracking basal body temperatures, like at the very least, then you're going to be in a pretty good place there. But everybody has kind of their own unique approach or spin on it. A book that I really like too, and I'm sure Stephanie has read this as well, but Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And I really like the way that they explain some of the principles in there. So not sure if anybody has read that, but definitely recommend it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one of my favorite prenatal books too is called It Starts with the Egg. And that one, it doesn't dive into like methods necessarily or things like that, but it's almost, it's along the lines of what we talked about tonight, how to prep your body for pregnancy, all the way down to like the quality of your egg, right? So a lot of people who sadly deal with miscarriage, it's because their egg quality was poor, right? It wasn't a sufficient enough egg to sustain the pregnancy. So this even goes deep into, how we can eat and essentially prep our body to inspire like the best quality eggs as well. So that's a really helpful one if people are interested in prenatal books. All right. Any more questions, guys? Got some really good ones. All right, Megan, do you have anything else to share?
I don't think so. I'm still looking to see why the availability isn't showing up. So I will figure that out in the next 5 minutes, but also, yeah, that's what I'm trying to look at, the virtual time slots right now. Wait, so Brittany, did you say it showed up on your phone? Cause I'm wondering if it's an issue just with the browser, if for some reason it's not showing up.
Does she mean like Zoom slots aren't available, but
yeah,
phone slots are?
I'll just come off.
Oh, she's saying phones. No, it should be just for phone. Sorry. The nutrition strategy session, that link, it should just show up for phone calls, not for Zoom calls.
Oh, okay. That makes
Is
sense.
that what you were saying?
Well, I think, yeah, so it has, how would you like to conduct the session? And it gives you the option by phone or online video. So nothing was showing up for online, but phone has a bunch of availability.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense then. So it should just give you the option for phone. I'll have to look to see why it's giving you both, but just book a phone session. And hopefully there's plenty of availability with that.
Yes, there is. Yeah. Thank you.
And you'll get a little questionnaire to fill out beforehand too. So it'll ask you some questions and you can kind of elaborate on where you are right now in your health journey and all of that stuff. So I'll look it over before we actually talk. And yeah.
Great. Thank
We
you.
did just get one more question. So do you have suggestions for how to encourage period to return when you're postpartum when following your other suggestions too? Yeah, so this is an awesome question. I think for one, if you're still breastfeeding, it's normal for your period to not have returned if you're still breastfeeding. I think obviously if you were to tailor off of breastfeeding, you would probably see a fairly, I don't want to say a quick return after that, but it would return faster than if you were not breastfeeding. But if you are breastfeeding and are continuing to breastfeed during postpartum, you need to be eating a good amount. So it's really going to tie into everything we already talked about tonight, but making sure you're eating plenty of calories during the day, making sure, stress on the body is as low as possible, and getting in really mineral rich foods too. So relying on things like bone broth and collagen, making sure we're getting in enough of those nourishing foods as well. So those would just be some of my first tips to come to mind there. But pretty much what we talked about tonight, making sure, especially when you're breastfeeding, because you're burning so many calories, that you're eating enough. Of course. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. I could talk about this for hours. I had so much fun and I really appreciate you all attending and asking great questions. And we hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks, Steph. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye.